The battlefield was quiet now. Not the kind of quiet that felt peaceful. It was the kind that came after screaming stopped. After steel stopped ringing. After men and beasts stopped falling. It was the quiet of exhaustion, of smoke, of things that could not be taken back. Owen walked through it slowly. He was not a young man anymore. His boots were worn through at the left heel. His coat was patched in 3 places and the patches were starting to fray. His face carried the kind of lines that did not come from age alone. They came from years of watching things go wrong and still showing up the next morning anyway. He had been a soldier for a long time. Long enough to stop counting. The battle had ended 2 hours ago. His unit had pushed the enemy line back across the ridge, and the commanders were already talking about the next move, the next position, the next objective. Owen had stopped listening. He had done his part. He had held his ground. Now he just wanted to find somewhere quiet to sit for a moment before the world asked something of him again. He moved away from the main camp without really thinking about it. His feet carried him down a slow slope toward a dry ravine at the edge of the field. It was the kind of place that soldiers avoided. Too far from the fire. Too close to the dark. That was exactly why Owen liked it. He climbed down carefully, using the rocks as steps, and stopped when he reached the bottom. He was not alone. There were 7 of them. Dragon fighters. He recognized the scaled armor, the broad shoulders, the thick necks built for carrying weight that would break a normal man. They were from the Allied Eastern Ridge Unit, the ones who had hit the enemy flank just before noon. Owen had seen them fighting from a distance. They had been something to watch. Fast, brutal, coordinated. They moved like they had been born for it. Now they looked like they were dying. 3 of them were flat on their backs. 2 more were leaning against the ravine wall, heads dropped forward. One was sitting upright but his breathing was wrong, too shallow, too fast. The last one, a female with a long scar running from her left eye down to her jaw, was kneeling in the dirt. She was trying to pour water from a canteen that had a hole in the bottom. Nothing came out. She turned it over in her hands and just stared at it. Owen stood there for a moment. He knew what had happened. The eastern flank had been cut off during the second push. He had heard the horns. He had seen the smoke from that direction. They must have fought their way out on foot through rough terrain, probably without resupply, probably without rest. The heat had been bad today. The kind that pulled water out of a body whether it wanted to give it or not. They needed water. That much was clear. Owen reached down to his belt and felt the weight of his canteen. He had filled it that morning. He had drunk from it twice during the battle, once after and once on the walk down here. There was maybe a third of it left. Enough for himself tonight. Maybe enough for tomorrow morning if he was careful. He looked at the dragon fighter with the broken canteen. She had not noticed him yet. She was still staring at the useless thing in her hands. Her knuckles were tight around it. There was something in her face that was not quite despair, but it was close. It was the look of someone who had held everything together for a very long time and was finally running out of strength to keep holding. Owen walked toward her. She heard his boots on the gravel and her head snapped up. Her eyes were sharp even now. One hand moved toward the blade at her side before she stopped herself. She looked at him. Her jaw was tight. Owen did not reach for a weapon. He did not say anything clever. He did not explain himself or make a speech. He just pulled the canteen from his belt, held it out, and waited. She stared at it. Then she stared at him. He could see her trying to understand. He could see the question moving behind her eyes. What? Why would he do this? He was human. She was dragonkind. They were allies on paper but strangers in practice. He owed her nothing. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. And the canteen in his hand was clearly his last one. Owen shook it gently so she could hear the water moving inside. She did not take it right away. She looked at her people. The ones on their backs. The one with the wrong breathing. She looked at the broken canteen in her other hand. Then she looked back at Owen. He nodded once. She reached out and took it. She drank one mouthful, just one, and immediately passed it to the nearest fighter on the ground. He drank. It went from hand to hand, careful and slow, each one taking only a small sip before passing it on. They were disciplined even now. Even half gone, they were disciplined. When the canteen came back to her, she looked at what was left and held it out toward Owen. He shook his head and closed her fingers around it. She watched him for a long moment. Her expression shifted into something he could not quite name. It was not gratitude exactly. It was something heavier than that. Something older. Owen sat down on a rock nearby, pulled his coat tighter and looked up at the dark sky. He did not know what he had just done. But she did. The night came in slowly. The sky turned from gray to dark blue to something close to black, and the stars came out one by one the way they always did, like they had not noticed there had been a war going on below them. Owen sat on his rock and listened to the ravine settle into stillness. The wind moved through the dry grass at the top of the ridge and made a low sound, almost like breathing. Around him, the dragon fighters slept. Not all of them. 2 were still awake, sitting quietly near the ravine wall, watching the dark with the kind of stillness that only came from long practice. Warriors on instinct even when their bodies were spent. Owen respected that. He had learned long ago that a soldier who could not rest without dropping every guard was a soldier who would not last very long. He was almost asleep himself when he heard movement beside him. He opened his eyes. The female warrior, the one with the scar, was sitting near him now. Not close enough to crowd him. Just close enough to talk. She had the empty canteen in her lap. She was turning it over in her hands slowly, not looking at it really, just holding it the way people held things when their hands needed something to do while their mind worked something out. Owen waited. She looked at him. Her eyes caught a little of the starlight. They were steady eyes. Come. But there was something working behind them. She spoke first. Her common tongue was rough but clear. The words came out one at a time, like she was picking each one carefully from a pile. Why, she said. Owen looked at her. Why what? She held up the empty canteen. This canteen. You gave this to us. She paused. We are not your kin. Not your unit. You do not know us. Owen thought about it for a moment. Not because the answer was hard, but because he wanted to say it right. I have been doing this a long time, he said. Soldiering. Long time. He looked out at the dark field beyond the ravine. I have seen a lot of men die. Good men. Strong men. Men who should have made it home. He was quiet for a second. Some of them died in battle. That happens. That is war. He paused again. But some of them died of thirst. Or cold. Or because nobody stopped to check if they were still breathing. He shook his head slowly. I decided a long time ago I was not going to walk past that if I could help it. She listened to every word. She did not interrupt. She did not look away. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, That is all? That is all, Owen said. She looked at the canteen again. Her grip tightened around it just slightly. Owen noticed but said nothing. My name is Sarah, she said. I lead this unit. Owen, he said. I don't lead anything. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but something. Then she became serious again. She sat up a little straighter and her voice shifted, became slower and more careful, like she was trying to explain something that mattered and did not want to get it wrong. Among my people, she said, water is not simple. Owen looked at her but said nothing, letting her continue. In the dry months, long ago, before the wars, before the alliances, our people crossed the stone deserts to find water. It took many days. Many did not make it. She stopped for a moment like she was seeing something far away. The ones who made it, they shared what they carried. Every drop. Even when they had almost nothing. Because they understood something. She looked directly at Owen. If you share your water with someone, you are saying something. You are saying their life matters more to you than your own comfort. You are saying you trust them. You are saying they are not a stranger anymore. She placed the canteen on the ground between them carefully, like she was setting something important down. Among my people, this is the deepest thing one warrior can do for another. It is older than rank. Older than any law we have. Owen looked at the canteen on the ground. He had not known any of that. He had just seen people who needed water and had water to give. That was the whole of it in his mind. I didn't know, he said simply. I know you did not know, Sarah said. That is what makes it more. He looked at her. If you had known, she said, you might have done it for the meaning, for the bond it creates, for what it would give you. She shook her head. But you did not know. You did it because it was right. Only because it was right. She paused. That is rarer than you think. Owen did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Sarah picked the canteen back up and held it out to him. He shook his head again. She pulled it back slowly and held it against her chest. The 2 sentries by the wall were watching now. Quietly. Not pretending not to listen. One of them, a younger fighter with a long jaw and tired eyes, said something low in the dragon tongue. Owen did not understand the words. But the tone was not hard to read. Sarah answered him without looking away from Owen. Her voice was steady. Whatever she said was short and certain. The young fighter nodded slowly and looked at Owen with something new in his eyes. Owen did not ask what was said. He pulled his coat around his shoulders, leaned back against the rock and closed his eyes. Above them the stars kept going. Owen heard it before he saw it. A low sound at first, like distant thunder rolling in from the wrong direction. Then it grew. Footsteps. Many of them. Moving fast across the hard ground above the ravine. The kind of sound that a man who had been soldiering long enough learned to recognize without thinking, the way a farmer recognized rain before it came. He was on his feet before his eyes were fully open. The night was still dark. The stars were out but the moon was low and thin. He could not see much beyond the ravine walls but he did not need to. He could feel it. Something was coming and it was coming with intent. Sarah was already awake beside him. She had not slept. He realized that now. She had just been sitting quietly in the dark while he dozed, watching and listening with those steady eyes. She stood without a sound and turned toward the ridge above them. Her hand was on her blade. Then the first shapes appeared at the top of the ravine. There were a lot of them. Owen counted fast and stopped counting when he reached 20. They were enemy scouts, the rear guard of the force that had been driven back earlier. Someone had sent them back to sweep the field. To clean up. To make sure nothing was left breathing in the low ground. Owen looked at Sarah's unit. 3 fighters still flat on the ground, too weak to stand. 2 more who could move but barely. The young fighter with the long jaw was on his feet but his left arm was bound tight against his chest. Sarah herself was the strongest of them and even she was not at full strength. They could not fight this. Not like this. Owen made his decision quickly. He turned to Sarah and kept his voice low and steady. Take your people and go. Back through the south end of the ravine. There is a trail that cuts up to the ridge. I saw it coming down. He checked the blade at his side and the short crossbow on his back. I will hold them here long enough for you to get clear. Sarah looked at him. He looked back at the shapes moving down into the ravine. They were picking their way carefully, not rushing, which meant they were trained. That was not good. Go, Owen said. Now. While there is still time. He stepped forward toward the open ground at the center of the ravine and rolled his shoulders back. He was tired. His legs ached. His left hand had a cut across the palm from the morning's battle that he had not had time to look at properly. None of that mattered right now. He heard Sarah behind him. He heard her speak to her fighters in a low voice. He thought she was telling them to move. To get up. To go south. Then he heard something else. A sound he had never heard before. It started low in her chest, like something waking up that had been sleeping a long time. It grew slowly, filling the ravine, bouncing off the stone walls. It was not a scream and it was not a roar exactly, but it was somewhere between the two, deep and resonant and full of something that had no word in Owen's language. It made the hairs on his arms stand up. It made the enemy shapes at the edge of the ravine stop moving. Owen turned around. Sarah was not moving south. She was standing directly behind him, her blade drawn, her eyes on the enemy above. And beside her, one by one, her fighters were rising. The 3 who had been flat on the ground were getting up. Slowly. Painfully. One of them was using his sword as a cane to push himself upright. His face was gray with effort. But he was standing. The 2 who could barely move were moving anyway. The young fighter with the bound arm drew his blade with his right hand and held it steady. Owen stared at them. Sarah stepped up beside him and looked straight ahead. What did you just do? Owen said quietly. Battle oath, she said. Old words. We say them when we choose to stand and not run. When we decide the ground behind us matters more than the ground ahead. She paused. We do not say them often. Your people are hurt, Owen said. Yes, Sarah said simply. There was no argument in her voice. No doubt. Just a flat and certain yes, like it was the most obvious thing in the world and also the least important. Owen turned back to face the enemy. They were moving again now, coming down faster, spreading out to cover the width of the ravine. Owen raised his crossbow and fired once. The lead figure dropped. The others slowed again, uncertain. That was the moment. Sarah moved first. She covered the ground between them with speed that should not have been possible for someone in her condition. Her blade caught one enemy across the shoulder and she turned the motion into a shove that sent him into 2 others behind him. The ravine was narrow. That was an advantage. They could not be flanked easily. They could not be surrounded if they kept tight. Owen fought the way he always fought. No wasted movement. No anger. Just work. He had learned years ago that the soldiers who survived were not always the strongest. They were the ones who stayed calm when everything around them was not. Behind him he heard the dragon fighters. He heard the effort in every movement. Every strike cost them something they did not have. But they did not stop. The enemy pushed twice more and pulled back twice. On the 3rd push they did not come back. The ravine went quiet again. Owen stood in the center of the open ground, breathing hard. Around him the dragon fighters held their positions. The one who had used his sword as a cane was on one knee now but still holding his blade out. Sara stood straight, her chest rising and falling fast. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then the young fighter with the bound arm said something in the dragon tongue. His voice was rough, but there was something almost like laughter underneath it. Sara looked at Owen. "He says," she translated, "that he is glad you did not have more water. Or we would have slept through the whole thing." Owen looked at the young fighter. Then he looked at the ground where the enemy had been. For the first time in a long time he almost smiled. The elder hall smelled of old stone and burnt wood. It was a wide space carved into the side of a mountain, deep enough that the outside world felt far away. The ceiling was high and uneven, shaped by hands that had worked the rock long before any living elder was born. Torches burned in iron holders along the walls, throwing long shadows across the floor. At the far end, behind a curved table of dark stone, sat the elder council of the dragon kind. There were 5 of them. They were old in the way that mountains were old. Not just in years but in weight. In the way they held themselves. In the stillness they carried. Each one wore a simple robe with no decoration, no rank markings, nothing to show who they were except the way the room changed when they sat in it. The eldest of them, a broad-shouldered figure named Vareth, sat at the center. His scales were pale with age, almost gray. His eyes were dark and unhurried. He had seen many councils. Many wars. Many things that people brought to this room thinking were extraordinary, which turned out to be ordinary once the word settled. He was not sure what this would be. Sara walked in alone. She had cleaned her wounds and changed her armor, but she had not tried to hide what the battle had done to her. The cut along her jaw was still raw. She moved with a slight pull on her left side that she was doing her best not to show. She stopped in the center of the floor, where the stone was worn smooth by generations of feet standing in the same spot, and she looked at the council directly. She did not bow deeply. She bent her head once, respectfully, and straightened. Vareth looked at her for a moment. Then he spoke. "You called this meeting?" he said. His voice was low and even. "Speak." Sara spoke. She started from the beginning. She told them about the eastern flank being cut off. She told them about the fighting retreat through the rough terrain. She told them about the heat and the hours without water and the broken canteen. She did not make it dramatic. She did not reach for strong words. She told it the way it happened, plainly, because she understood that plain truth was stronger than decoration. She told them about the ravine. She told them about the human veteran who had walked down into it alone and found them there. She described the way he had looked at them. Not with pity. Not with hesitation. Not with the careful calculation of a man deciding whether helping them was worth the cost. He had just looked at them the way a person looked at a problem that needed solving, and then he had reached for his canteen without a word. She told them it was his last one. The hall was very quiet. One of the elders, a narrow-faced female named Desh, leaned forward slightly. "He knew it was his last?" "Yes," Sara said. "There was nothing else on his belt." "He knew." Desh sat back slowly. Sara continued. She told them what Owen had said when she asked him why. She repeated his words as closely as she could. She told them about the way he had spoken, without pride, without wanting anything from it, like a man explaining why he had picked up something someone dropped. Because it was there. Because it needed doing. She told them about the battle oath. About her fighters rising. About the second wave and how they held the ravine together, a handful of wounded dragon warriors and one tired human with a crossbow and a blade, standing in the dark against odds that should have ended them. And she told them that when it was over, Owen had sat back down on his rock, pulled his coat around himself, and gone to sleep like it was an ordinary night. The council was silent for a long time after she finished. Not the silence of people who had nothing to say. The silence of people who had too much and were deciding carefully what to do with it. Vareth looked at the table in front of him. His old hands rested flat on the stone. He was still for so long that a younger observer might have wondered if he had heard any of it. Then he spoke. "He did not know the meaning," Vareth said. It was not a question. "No," Sara said. "I told him afterward." "He said he did not know." "And when you told him?" "He said he was sorry. That if he had known it carried such weight he would have found a way to say it better." Sara paused. "He meant it." Vareth closed his eyes for a moment. The elder to his right, a heavy-set male named Karath who had not spoken once since Sara entered, let out a long slow breath through his nose. He looked at Vareth. Something passed between them without words. Desh spoke quietly. "The water code has not been fulfilled by an outsider in recorded history." "No," Vareth agreed. "It was not performed as ceremony," said the elder at the far left, youngest of the 5, a serious figure named Pell. It was not taught to him. It was not done for recognition. He looked at Sarah. He simply did it. Yes, Sarah said. Pell sat back and said nothing more. But his expression said enough. Vareth lifted his eyes to Sarah. What is his rank? He has none of significance, Sarah said. He is a common soldier. Long service. No title. Vareth nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he had already suspected. He looked at each elder in turn. No long speeches. No debate. Just a look and a nod returned, one by one, down the curved table. When he reached the last one he looked back at Sarah. Bring him, Vareth said simply. Sarah bent her head. She turned and walked back toward the entrance, her boots quiet on the worn stone floor. Behind her, the council sat in the kind of silence that only came when something old and important had just been set into motion. Owen had never been inside a mountain before. He followed Sarah through a long passage carved into the rock, lit by torches spaced evenly along the walls. The air was cool and dry and smelled of something old. His boots made small sounds on the stone floor that came back to him as echoes. He kept his hands loose at his sides and his face calm, the way he had learned to keep it in places he did not fully understand. Sarah had not told him much. She had come to find him at the camp that morning, standing outside his tent with that same steady look she always carried, and said the council wished to see him. He had asked why. She had said they would explain. He had pulled on his coat, checked his boots and followed her. That was the whole of it as far as he was concerned. The passage opened into the elder hall and Owen stopped for just a moment. It was larger than he expected. The ceiling climbed high above him into shadow. The torches along the walls made the stone look amber and warm. And at the far end, behind the long curved table, sat 5 figures who carried the kind of stillness that made the room feel different from the moment he stepped into it. He walked forward and stopped where Sarah had stopped the day before, on the worn smooth stone in the center of the floor. He looked at the council. They looked at him. The one at the center, the old pale one, studied him for a moment without speaking. Owen did not look away and did not fidget. He had stood in front of commanders before. He knew how to wait. Then the old one spoke. His name was Vareth. He said it plainly and Owen nodded once. Vareth then spoke slowly and carefully, the way someone spoke when they wanted every word to land where it was meant to. He told Owen what the water meant. He told him about the stone deserts and the long crossings and the people who had shared their last drops so that others could keep walking. He told him about the water code, how it was the oldest bond in dragonkind, older than any war or alliance or written law. He told him that to give your last water to a stranger, freely, without knowing the meaning, without wanting anything back, was the purest form the code could ever take. He told Owen that in all of recorded history, no one outside of dragonkind had ever fulfilled it. Until 3 nights ago in a ravine at the edge of a battlefield. Owen listened to all of it without interrupting. His expression did not change much. He looked at Vareth the way he looked at everything, steadily taking it in, letting it settle. When Vareth finished, the hall was quiet. Then Vareth folded his hands on the table and said that the council wished to offer Owen the highest honor in dragon warrior culture. A kinship bond. A name in their oldest tongue. A place in their history that would be spoken aloud at every council from this day forward. No outsider had ever been given it. No outsider had ever earned it. He asked Owen if he would accept. Owen was quiet for a moment. Not a long moment. Just enough to make sure he said it right. Then he spoke. His voice was the same as it always was. Low and unhurried. Not nervous. Not proud. Just a man saying what was true. He said that he was grateful. That he meant that sincerely. He looked at the council and then at Sarah standing to his left and he said that what happened in that ravine was one of the better nights of a very long career and he would not forget it. Then he said that he could not accept the honor. The hall was very still. He continued before anyone could speak. He said that he did not give the water for a bond or a name or a place in anyone's history. He did not do it because he knew what it meant or what it would bring. He did it because there were soldiers on the ground who needed water and he had water to give. That was the beginning and the end of it. He said that accepting an honor for something that simple felt wrong. Like it would change what it was. Like it would make it into something he had planned, something he had done for a reason other than the only reason that mattered. He said the only reason that mattered was that it was right. Then he stopped talking and waited. Vareth looked at him for a long time. The other elders were still. Desh had her eyes on the table. Karath was looking at Owen with an expression that was hard to read. Pell the youngest was very quiet. Then Vareth did something that Sarah had never seen him do in all the years she had known him. He stood up. He was slow about it, the way old things moved when they moved with full intention. He straightened to his full height behind the dark stone table and he bent his head forward. A deep and deliberate bow. One by one, without a word between them, the other 4 elders rose and did the same. 5 of the oldest and most respected figures in dragonkind, standing in their own hall, bowing to a tired human soldier in a patched coat and worn boots. Owen looked at them. He did not know exactly what to do, so he bent his head in return, the same way Sarah had, once, and with respect. When the elders sat back down, Vareth looked at him with something quiet and certain in his eyes. He said that Owen had just proven, without meaning to, exactly why the honor belonged to him. Owen walked back through the mountain passage alone. Outside, the morning was cool and pale and ordinary. He pulled his coat around his shoulders and started back toward camp. He did not know that by the time the next battle was called, word had already moved through every Dragon Rider unit across the eastern range. He did not know that riders had begun asking, quietly, which engagements Owen was assigned to. He did not know any of it. He was thinking about breakfast. But from that morning forward, wherever Owen was called to fight, dragon fighters came. Not because orders sent them. Not because a council told them to. Because a canteen had been offered in the dark by a man who expected nothing, and among those who understood what that meant, there was only one answer. They came because he was worth standing beside. And that, in the end, was everything.